No, sir, we do not.
Any comments by council? Hearing none, Ms. Davis, 027.
Thank you. Counselor Colbert?
Yes.
Counselor Weimer?
Yes.
Counselor Linentine?
Yes.
Counselor Tyler?
Yes.
Counselor Dabson?
Yes.
And Counselor List.
Yes.
027 is approved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to discussion and deliberation. So for comment purposes, we've got R134, R135, and R136. We're going to take all presentations at the top of each of these and all public comment at the top of each of these, and then we will move into subsequent votes on each one of them. So, but the presentations and comments will be before all three and for all three. So if you have comments about these various different things, please address them at this time during the comment period. With that, moving on to discussion and deliberation, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, good evening. Noel's pulling up the PowerPoint. If I may, I'm just going to present from my chair here this evening. And we have 3 items before you, as you introduced, Mr. Mayor, R134, 135, and R36. These 3 items, and we'll go into detail on them. The first one is, in no particular order, but a resolution authorizing a budget adjustment for the economic development expenditure for Project Ranger of $1 million. R35 is a resolution auzing the city manager to negotiate and enter into an agreement for water and potentially wastewater services for Project Ranger, Castilian Corporation. R136 is a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with Sandoval County, pursuant to the Local Economic Development Act, LEDA, and the City of Rio Rancho's Local Economic Development Plan in order to support the extension of New Mexico 347 Paseo de Volcan from Unser to Rainbow as part of the Project Ranger Castilian Corporation initiative. If I may, from kind of an order of flow, given that we have some speakers and the company is in attendance as well, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the items before you. After that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Wenzel of the Rio Rancho Fire Rescue Department to provide an overview of our automatic aid, emergency response, and pre-incident planning, safety planning, given that the city provides automatic aid, and he'll go into greater detail for the areas west of the city limits. And then from there, invite the New Mexico Economic Development Department Director Mark Roper to provide any remarks or presentations that he may have, Castilian presentation, public comment, and then Councilor Q&A. So just a quick overview. As I think you all know by now, and for the benefit of the public, Sandoval County and the New Mexico Economic Development Department have been the lead agencies on the recruitment process of Project Ranger to New Mexico. This engagement goes back probably about a year now. The Sandoval County Board of County Commissioners has voted unanimously 12 times on Project Ranger action items at 6 different meetings dating back to June 25th of this year, and you can see the dates on the calendar or on the PowerPoint here. Subsequent votes on 7/23, 8/27, 9/24, 10/8, and 10/22. As I have quipped, we are the caboose on this item, and in some cases, we're the caboose that hasn't exactly been connected to the train either. There was a community meeting on 10/21 in Northern Meadows at the elementary school there. This community meeting stemmed from 2 items. The state land office land lease had a requirement for public engagement. However, that really wasn't time specific or have a deadline for it. And Mr. Mayor, would like to acknowledge your efforts in communications with the Cabinet Secretary of the Economic Development Department to really advocate for that community meeting to take place and help get the word out about the project. It was well attended. About 250 to 300 people attended that. I think it was a beneficial thing for the broader community to understand what Project Ranger is. Granted, what it is also can sound very scary, and I think Castilian Corporation will walk through kind of some of the realities and where the rubber hits the road on perception versus reality with their project. Before the governing body this evening are really 3 specific narrow action items, not really pertaining to the broader and economic development and inducement incentive package. That process has taken place. The company and the Economic Development Department in Sandoval County are very advanced in that phase. It would be $1 million and an IGA for funding for Paseo de Volcan, and that's the corresponding budget resolution, and authorize the negotiation of the water service. These items have a staff recommendation of approval. I will go into these items a little bit and it's elaborated in great detail in the ABM to why there's a staff recommendation of approval on these items. Paseo de Volcan, I think it's twofold. It has been a long-range planning goal for many people in the northwest quadrant, Sandoval County, Rio Rancho area. As we know, there's really only two ways in and out of the city of Rio Rancho. We look at it in the long term in that transportation planning. And if you look at a 2040, 2050, 2060 transportation planning organization map, no one is showing another bridge over the river. This would only address the first 2 miles of about a 25-mile journey down to I-40, and whether that ultimately connects into Atrisco or connects all the way down to I-40, it is conceptually and potentially the first step towards opening up another route in and out of the city and also to unincorporated Sandoval County. I think more specifically and more germane today, and I think this is something, again, I would like to point to you, Mr. Mayor, is keeping the traffic associated with this project out of Northern Meadows. This would be a route to the site, and when this project first came forward to us and our different steps where we have been involved, that was a concern raised, I think, by you, Mr. Mayor, and city staff, is the potential for construction traffic, freight traffic, even though it's only a couple trucks a week, as well as, the workforce driving down through Northern Meadows. While King Boulevard is rated as an arterial, it is also a neighborhood street. And so I think a more immediate, targeted, next couple of years piece to this Paseo de Volcan is funding, so there's a direct route to the site in traffic. The prospect of the potentiality of traffic going through Northern Meadows would be drastically reduced. The second is water service outside of city limits. It's been a couple decades now that the city took the step to rein in, I will call it, or close the spigot on water service outside of city limits. There has been resolutions in place to ratify that position. Over the years, I would say that along the way there was creep in providing water service outside of city limits because we do have water infrastructure. We have 3 wells, booster stations, main service lines in the county. That is part of our pumping permit area. And it became easy to say, yeah, we'll just go ahead and allow you to connect your house to this water line. And it was supporting residential growth. And I think really the decision led in the direction of, if we're going to use our water resource through our pumping permit that is allocated to us of the 24,000 acre feet, we rather support residential growth within city limits, not outside of city limits. This is different in that it is an industrial economic development project. The use and the intent of the water in that regard is not the same as, and I hate to, every house is important, but it's not another house, it's not another subdivision. It is in the support of, it would be in the support of economic development. Furthermore, we have water infrastructure in that area, and actually being the water service provider is a way for us to be able to monitor and protect our water service, our water infrastructure, our aquifer. As I said, we have infrastructure of 3 wells out there, as well as monitoring wells. As flagged in your ABM, I did highlight 2 pending issues that are out there. Now, Chief Wentz and I will be able to talk a little bit about both of these in today's presentation. And these are, issues that trailing issues, hanging chat issues, everyone described it, that are still out there over the last 30 days. The first one is clarity and timing around the extension of Paseo de Volcan. Again, Mr. Mayor, referring back to your conversations with the project team, with the Secretary of Economic Development, really emphasizing the importance of PDV as the route outside of the city to the project. Right now, our understanding, as reported to the county, is the total cost is about $20 million to go from Unser to Rainbow Boulevard to city limits. And that is proposed to be built in 2 phases, phase 1, phase 2. I think one of my future slides is an actual exhibit of that. Each phase is about $10 million, is my understanding, and funding is identified for the first phase. Funding is unidentified for the second phase. And there's a proposal that the county is looking at. They presented to our Public Works Department and some other folks last week to actually do some improvements to 28th Avenue and use that as the route exiting the city. And then without stealing Chief Wenzel's thunder by any stretch, really looking to get some clarity, some meat on the bones, as I've used that term a few times in this project, on Rio Rancho Fire Rescue's roles and responsibilities with respect to the authority having jurisdiction, fire plan review, emergency response, fire safety, pre-incident safety planning, and all these, I think, are really that broad bucket, or that broad theme there, umbrella, is in line with some of the public comment that we heard at the October 21st community meeting. This is a question mark that the community has, and how will Rio Rancho Fire be in a place to protect the community, but also respond effectively in the best in class, in the world-class manner which they do in delivering their fire and EMS service to an area that's currently in our automatic aid arrangement. This quick slide, and before I hand it back over, or invite Chief Wenzel to speak, it's a little hard to see. I have a printout if any of the governing body members would like to see it, but over there on the blue on the far right of the screen, that is phase one, that my understanding is communicated by the county to us on Friday or Saturday is that there's funding in place to get Paseo de Volcan to Meadows Boulevard. There is pending funding to be determined. Lots of good ideas, lots of good intentions, is my understanding, to secure funding for phase two. So while that is being determined or worked out potentially through some right-of-way acquisition issues, I'm not quite sure, in addition to funding, if there are any other hurdles for phase two to be complete. The route would, I'll just call it, jog over to 28th Avenue, which is the green line, and continue with some version of improvements within city limits. And then I'm not sure if it would be improved or just an all-weather road outside of city limits. And that green line is 28th Avenue until it jogs back to the alignment of the platted 29th Avenue out to the site. So that's, you can kind of see phase one, and then phase two, then the subsequent phases outside. But you can see again, that blue line is proposed phase one for Paseo de Volcan. The red line is the future Paseo de Volcan alignment going out towards, ultimately, I-40. At this point, Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, I would like to invite Chief Wenzel to go through some information he has that addresses a lot of the questions we've had, progress that has been made on the questions so far. And then once Chief Wenzel concludes there, I would like to invite the Economic Development Department and Project Ranger to speak.
Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, good evening. James Wenzel, Fire Chief, Rio Rancho Fire Rescue. As the city manager said, I'm going to be expanding on some of the concerns that we had with the site, our interactions with the team from Project Ranger, Castilian, as well as Sandoval County Fire Rescue and Sandoval County Administration. So it kind of comes down to three main areas that I'd like to discuss tonight. The first one being limited and inconsistent communication within Rio Rancho Fire Rescue and my staff. So the initial communication was a little bit vague, and I think that was mostly due to confusion with who has authority having jurisdiction. As you know, this is Sandoval County proper land. However, the state fire marshal actually oversees the code enforcement due to Sandoval County Fire Rescue not having a fire marshal's office. The automatic aid agreement places Rio Rancho Fire Rescue as the responding agency to this location. So there's a bunch of different hands in the cookie jar, if you will. I will say that in the previous weeks, we have seen an increase in communication with Project Ranger, Sandoval County, and I think moving forward, that's it's a strong indication of joint effort in ensuring that we have safety out there to the appropriate level that we deem fit for our first responders. The second point I'd like to discuss today is the overall effects of the department, and that kind of covers two main areas. The first, kind of our routine calls, the call volume, what we can anticipate with a facility of that nature being built. And the second goes into more of the back of house ideas, which are the administrative duties such as site safety planning, pre-incident planning, fire inspections, and whatnot. Finally, the big topic of authority having jurisdiction. So as you know, we have automatic aid. Automatic aid differs from mutual aid in that if a call comes out in this area of the county, Rio Rancho Fire Rescue automatically dispatches. We don't have a request for mutual aid. Our units and our crews respond immediately. So with that being said, there's about 6 different types of calls that I anticipate Project Ranger and how it'll impact Rio Rancho Fire Rescue. Those are listed on the screen and start with kind of the lowest and then go all the way to the highest. So, fire alarm activations, false alarms, somebody pulls a smoke alarm or a fire activation. EMS calls, including falls. This is encompassing the employees who may work there as well as visitors, increased traffic to Northern Meadows, so on and so forth. That takes me to point 3, which is motor vehicle accidents, and then motor vehicle accidents that include injuries. The 4th is hazardous material. That could be hazardous material that's being transported in or out of the site, as well as potential accidents within the site. Number 5, we have small-scale fire suppression. So this could be something as small as a brush fire, accidental, toaster fire. Crews are trying to make something. It still activates the system, but we would have to respond. And then 6 is the all hands on deck. Something's happened. This is what we're hoping never happens in a facility like this. And those are kind of how we look at gauging what our potential impact might be. So looking at automatic aid agreement, I think it's important to understand kind of the evolution of the automatic aid agreement. So 2013, it was established, and it was placed in formal methods, if you will. And then we revisited it in 2023. In 2023, it was revisited, and it was established with a little bit more data collection on our end in terms of how many calls we were actually going to within that portion of Sandoval County. And then we implemented a new cost analysis matrix that allowed us to kind of come up with an idea of what providing that service cost. That was developed using a wildland deployment model, as well as unit out of service time. So how long and how many times were our crews being dispatched and then not available to respond to the city and citizens within it. Finally, that'll be revisited at the end of 2026, where it's due for renegotiation in 2027. Obviously, we continue to take that data request into consideration. We have our call matrix that allows us to anticipate potential calls in the coming years, as well as review previous years. We'd also be factoring Project Ranger and the anticipated call volume and implications from that site. So the potential impact of the call volume. So we use Intel as a gauge, if you will. On average, we run 75 calls to Intel. Intel, as you know, is also within Sandoval County. There's a couple differences with Intel as opposed to Project Ranger. The first is Intel sits very close to the city in terms of boundaries. So as soon as we enter the site, well, we may be on Sandoval County property. As soon as we exit, we're immediately on the big thoroughfares of 528 and within city boundaries. We're closer to hospitals, so that does go into consideration as well. And there's 2 big potential impacts. 1, Project Ranger will pool resources from Station 6 and Station 2. As those units go to respond, the other stations then have to cover and backfill those locations if a call were to generate in those districts. It kind of starts the domino effect, and we potentially start running our crews a little bit thin for coverage within the city. There's also the pre-incident safety planning. That is a time commitment. However, it's vital for familiarization within the site. High target hazards such as Project Ranger require first responders to actively engage with the site crew on their premise and make sure we understand exactly where everything's located, where we're supposed to go, where we're not supposed to go, and how we mitigate any emergencies that originate there. It's kind of hard to tell. That's an aerial view that kind of gives an overview of the city. It showcases the 7 fire stations that we have within the city, as well as at the top north, 528 and 550, Station 21 for Sandoval County. There's a little red dot on the screen that's outside of the city limits. You can see that's Project Ranger. So it showcases why we have automatic aid with Sandoval County. There's 7 stations within the city that would be able to provide assistance to that site before Sandoval County's fire station located at 528 and 550, Station 21. Again, that's just for point of reference. So moving on, AHJ and permitting. So there was a variance request that was submitted by from the company to the State Fire Marshal's office, as well as New Mexico CID Construction Industries Division. They had 2 main points on that. Excuse me. The first was that they required no fire sprinklers in the hazardous buildings, and they referenced Department of Defense Standard 4145. We are fully aware and understand that request. That is an industry standard to not have water suppression in those facilities due to them being oxidizers and the potential volatile reaction. Number two is no fire hydrants for hazardous buildings, again, referencing DOD Standard 4145. We're currently working with them, Castilian, as well as Sandoval County, to ensure that hydrants are placed on the facility to the liking and the requirements set forth by the International Fire Code 2021 edition, which the state of New Mexico and Rio Rancho Fire Rescue currently follow. State Fire, who operates and acts as the authority having jurisdiction for this location for fire code, has offered an approval to the first request, which is no sprinklers. Again, we've gone into explanation of why that's okay. However, they have said that fire hydrant exception is deferred to the local AHJ. In their words, given their responsibility as the responding party. So they placed that on the local AHJ. That in this case would be Sandoval County. So what does it all mean? Site specific, when we look at Castilian, they verbally indicated yes to putting to having the installation of fire sprinklers in the non-hazardous buildings. There would be the pending resolution that is before you tonight that would allow for water and then would most likely allow for the implementation of fire hydrants as opposed to water storage tanks. AHJ-wise, who is AHJ? The authority having jurisdiction for this site remains with Sandoval County. However, this afternoon, in a discussion with Sandoval County Administration and the State Fire Marshal's Office, including myself, we discussed the possibility of MOU. That MOU would offer an official formal request to the various parties and what expectations and involvement they would have on the site. I find this to be very, very important. I think Rio Rancho Fire Rescue deserves to have that seat at the table, as our responders are the primary responders to this location. We have to have an ability to understand any variances and exceptions in the suppression systems so that our first responders and their safety is kept as a paramount requirement. Moving on to the site safety planning. So pre-incident planning, as I was talking about earlier in the presentation, it's very time consuming, but it's a kind of a necessary evil. Due to the high-risk classification, we would warrant pre-plan and area familiarization for all of our crews, not just Stations 2 or Station 6, but the entire fire department on all 3 shifts. That's done so we can establish the working relationship with the on-site security guards and response team, so we understand, again, how to navigate their location, what are areas that we can and cannot go to. And then ultimately, all of that feedback is pulled back, and we use that to create an incident action plan. That's how we determine how we fully respond and then mitigate any risks that develop there. There's also the annual fire inspections. So as you can imagine, a site of this magnitude would require annual fire inspections, just like any other commercial property. It's actually a requirement for the ISO, Insurance Services Office, and something that we would participate in joint collaboration with the State Fire Marshal Office. That goal is to obviously make sure that all of the fire suppression systems, including the fire sprinkler system and fire alarm systems, are active and working to the required and intended purposes. So in closing, the goals moving forward. We want to finalize the MOU between the Sandoval County Fire Rescue Department, State Fire Marshal's Office, and Rio Rancho Fire Rescue. Determine placement of the exterior fire hydrants and those needed for the non-fire hazard buildings. Formal review of fire plans, hoping to locate and have the different classifications of the hazard divisions 1.1 and 1.3 on those plans. A plume study. I should also note that I'm talking with Castilian about the plume study. If it were to come back and have contradict any of the variance requests, then their response to that would be to remove some of them out of their chemicals to where that plume study then did not contradict those variance requests. And then ultimately review and update the automatic aid agreement in early 2027. So with that, I will stand for Q&A, or did you want to continue to move on and then we'll stand for Q&A at the very end?
Yeah, we'll do all the Q&A after we get the full city manager presentation, and then we'll take the applicant's presentation, and then we'll circle back for Q&A and all at the same time.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, at this time I would I'd like to provide Mr. Roper with the New Mexico Economic Development Department an opportunity to speak, followed by Castilian Corporation.
Okay. If we're moving, are staff done with their presentation at this point?
Mr. Mayor, at this point, for now, yes.
Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and take a let's make it a 10-minute recess. Give everybody the opportunity to go to the restroom real quick, and we'll come back and we'll start those presentations right after this recess. Thank you. Where's Tyler?
Yeah, the biggest problem was people parking out there.
Oh, my word. All right, going to go ahead and call this meeting back to order. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll go ahead and, Mr. Roper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. For the record, I'm Mark Roper. I'm the Division Director of Economic Development for the New Mexico Economic Development Department, and I am here to speak on behalf and in favor of Project Ranger. The New Mexico Economic Development Department has been working with this project for roughly a year. Our analysis has shown that this will
Recording in progress.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, very good. We now are on the record for sure.
There we go.
Our analysis is indicated that this project will generate $650 million in overall economic impact over the next 10 years. Now, when you talk about overall economic impact, that's taking into all things induced, indirect jobs, all of that discretionary spending and all of the additional add things, total economic development. But when we really look at a project, we want to drill down and look at the fiscal impact. What's the fiscal impact? Because we want to see where our return on investment is going to come from. And when I say our return on investment, I'm talking about the public dollars. You know, how is this project going to impact the public dollars? This project will bring back approximately $30 million in direct fiscal impact. That means tax dollars that will come back to the state, the city, and the county. Now, because this project is located outside of the city limits and not within the boundaries of Rio Rancho, the impact on the city is not as great as you would anticipate, but there's still significant impact to the city of Rio Rancho because we all know that the majority of these 300 jobs are going to live in Rio Rancho, which I'll digress a little bit from the data here. I know all of you that live in Rio Rancho are going to be really happy that there's 300 jobs that aren't crossing the river to go to work. They're going to get to stay on this side of the river to go to work and won't have near the impacts on the traffic on the arteries that go to the east side to those jobs. It will create about $6 million in direct fiscal impact to the city of Rio Rancho, about $4.5 million in direct fiscal impact to Sandoval County. So as you can see, a return of $30 million, and these are all based on 10-year data. As I mentioned, this will bring 300 high-paying jobs meaning the average salary will be over $100K on the jobs. The construction of this project will have approximately 440 construction jobs to get this project fully constructed. And as I mentioned, as we're looking at the overall economic impact, we look at induced and indirect jobs that will be created by the activity of this project, both on a construction and a full-time basis, and that will be an additional 400 jobs in the Sandoval County, Rio Rancho area. A couple of other items that I'd like to speak to. These 300 high-paying jobs are another opportunity for students of New Mexico Institutes of Higher Education, of New Mexico High School, specifically Rio Rancho High School, the whole entire Rio Rancho school districts, including Cleveland and others. Opportunities, job opportunities. They won't be leaving the state of New Mexico to find those job opportunities, because they're going to have those opportunities right here in their backyard. It's going to give the opportunity for certain New Mexicans that have left because those job opportunities weren't here, and they're going to be able to come back to Sandoval County, to Rio Rancho, to New Mexico to get these quality jobs in a very exciting industry, an industry that New Mexico has a lot of history in developing, but we really haven't done a very good job of making these things in New Mexico, manufacturing these products. We're really good about inventing them and then letting somebody else build them. So this is a really great opportunity to bring this product back to New Mexico. As the city manager pointed out, there's been multiple hearings and public actions by Sandoval County. But I want to specifically reiterate a couple of those that the city manager mentioned, and that's on the specific dates of July 23rd, August 22nd, September 24th, October 8th, and October 22nd. And while these dates are important, is those were all actions taken by Sandoval County that by statute included a public hearing, meaning that citizens had the right to come and speak on behalf, similar to what you're doing tonight. So there's been multiple opportunities for the community to speak on this project and hear about that. As the city manager also pointed out, the company, at the behest of the state land office, and more importantly at the behest of the mayor, to have this community meeting, and it was done in Northern Meadows at Cielo Azul Elementary School, so virtually in the backyard. The company came in and made their presentation, answered questions. I know, and they stayed after the time to answer individual questions with the company. And you'll get to hear from the company later. But they've proven that they have a true commitment to want to be a good member of the community. And I appreciate the fire chief's comparison to Intel. 75 calls to Intel on an annual basis, 10 times more employees at Intel than there will be at Project Ranger. So I guess that means there's only going to be about 7 calls annually to Project Ranger. Again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the New Mexico Economic Development Department has evaluated this project. We have put $5 million in state LEDA funds towards this project as part of the project participation agreement that was passed by Sandoval County, and we greatly encourage you to support this project. Thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, we want to move on to the applicant now?
Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, yes, Andrew Kreitz, representative from
Okay.
Stealing Corporation.
Perfect. Yes, Mr. Kreitz? Hi, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, and thank you all for your time. My name is Andrew Kreitz. I'm CFO and one of the co-founders of Castellian Corporation, here to speak on Project Ranger. I want to say, first of all, that as the city manager was alluding to earlier, we are very, very cognizant, and I would say very empathetic to the fact that what we are doing, and we'll get into some of the details here in a moment, sounds scary. Does not sound like, it's not the sort of thing that most of us encounter in day-to-day life, and it's sort of very specific to the industry that we at Castellian work in, which is aerospace and defense. That said, what we really want to do today is be as transparent as we possibly can. We want to walk through as much detail as we can, and we want to shine a light on both what we will be doing at the site and some misconceptions that might be out there, because our goal is to get you as representatives of the people comfortable, but also to get the people comfortable directly. It's why we did the community meeting last month. It's why we're very committed to spending time with people to answer their questions and really shine a light on what are we doing, how we are going to do it safely, and what the benefits to the community are going to be. I might add as well, before I forget, We, of course, look forward to your questions and answers. We have a number of members of the Castellian team from site development and manufacturing here. So I'll answer as many as I can when the time comes, but we'll defer to my teammates on any of the technical questions that might be outside of my purview. The other thing I'll say, this is very similar to the presentation that we worked through with the community at the community meeting. So we have a lot of content to cover. I'll move briskly through it so that we can cover everything. A lot of it's very important, but again, welcome the Q&A on the back end to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. With that, could we, perfect, thank you very much. Excellent. Let's see if, there we go. So just starting very directly, what is Project Ranger? Project Ranger is a scale production site for solid rocket motors. It's a final assembly site for all-up rounds. That means a whole missile from tip to tail. So what are we actually doing at the Project Ranger site? Well, as I said, we'll be assembling the rounds. I'll talk a little bit later in detail about sort of what that process looks like. We'll be manufacturing the solid rocket motors. We'll talk more about that in detail later as well. It's a mixing and casting process. And we'll be assembling and testing electronic components. So that means the flight computer for the missile, control actuation systems, radars, that sort of thing. Piece parts being assembled mostly in sort of a lab setting on benches. What we are not doing is synthesizing ammonium perchlorate. We'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. We will not be launching missiles, so there will be a static fire test site. That means that the rocket motor is held down securely horizontally. We attach sensors to it, you ignite the rocket motor, you collect data. We're not going to be doing flight testing, we're not going to be launching missiles into the air and over people's homes or anything like that. There's no flight operations that are planned. And we'll not be manufacturing chemicals. We've also, in the last day, gotten some questions about other sort of heavy metal chemical processes, things like plating or chrome plating. We will not be doing any of that at this facility either. It is just the items on the left. I don't want to belabor this, but I do want to at least briefly cover why are we doing this and why is this so important. And for this, we really sort of need to look a little bit to history. We need to look at the era immediately following the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. It was the era of the peace dividend. It was the era of the United States being the sole remaining superpower as an era of sort of great optimism around peace and prosperity. And unfortunately, what we have seen, especially over the course of the last decade, is that the world remains a very, very dangerous place. We see conflicts that not so long ago would have been unthinkable. A land war in Europe, the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, the threat of conflict in the Western Pacific. We see our adversaries, notably China and Russia, making great strides in military technology and manufacturing. And the reality is that during that era of the peace dividend, we as a country took a lot of that manufacturing capacity offline. What we are finding now, and it's hard to overstate how acute the problem is, what we are finding now is that U.S. and allied, so that means NATO and Pacific allies, our munitions inventories are at effectively all-time lows. We don't have the production capacity to make up for consumption rates. If you look at just one example, a missile called THAAD, that's a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. It's an interceptor that shoots down incoming missiles to protect U.S. assets and allied assets. We expended 25% of those missiles that have ever been produced in history during 1 week of conflict in the Middle East. I say all this because it really tees up why what we are doing is so important, why there is urgency about bringing this capacity online, and why there is so much focus from the Department of War, from the administration, and really, I should say, from Congress and the armed services on finding a solution to this quickly. This is very much a bipartisan issue. The charge is being led by the current administration, of course, but we saw a lot of push and a lot of pressure and a lot of work being done here in the prior administration as well. And I won't belabor this either, but just for perspective on specifics with hypersonic strike, which is what we at Castellian are working on, it's actually hard to overstate the scale of the Chinese lead over the United States in this particular strategically critical arena. The Chinese field approximately 10 active hypersonic systems today with very high production rates. The United States is at this time bringing its first system online, and the Chinese have a significant lead on us from a technological standpoint. The reason that this is so critical, the reason that this is so important, is because of our sort of unofficial company motto, which is peace through deterrence. We have very high conviction, and again, this is a bipartisan issue, Republican or Democrat. From the foreign policy side, there is very high conviction that the best way to prevent a war, whether in Europe or whether in the Western Pacific, is to ensure that the United States has an effective conventional non-nuclear deterrent. That is something we have lost over the last few decades. It is something that we at Castellian are very proud to be working very hard to close the gap on. One thing I want to address with talking a little bit about members of our team. Castellian is a young company. We were founded in 2022. However, although we are a young company, we are staffed by industry veterans. We are a heavily ex-SpaceX company, but we also draw quite a few members of our team from across the aerospace and defense primes and from across the national lab system. So my co-founder, our CEO, Brian Hargis, was the program architect and head business development person for what is now called Starshield, which is a critical U.S. capability that SpaceX provides with on-orbit ISR for the intelligence community. Sean Pitt is our COO. He led Falcon 9 rocket sales for the continent of Europe, selling to European satellite firms and to U.S. partners and allies. And if you look across the engineering side, we worked with Jacob Swears at SpaceX, also on the Starshield program. He led development of the host satellite there. Deacon Counts, who leads our Seeker team, spent 20 years at Raytheon and L3 He is one of the experts in the world on developing radar seekers for missile systems. We worked with Satyam Satyarthi, also on Starshield, and he's our VP of Engineering. Extensive experience working classified and critical programs in space. Paul Perry was an early employee at Zipline, which is the world's largest drone delivery company. David Ferguson, who leads our avionics team, designed the Crew Dragon flight computer while he was at SpaceX. So the flight computer for the capsule, which takes our astronauts to the International Space Station, design of that was led by David Ferguson. He was also instrumental in development of the Starlink and Starshield flight computers. And Bobby Pinerio, who's here with us tonight, spent 12 years at SpaceX leading manufacturing across a variety of critical teams on both Falcon 9 and Dragon. I won't hit every name on this second page here, but at the community meeting we had with us Captain Greg Zettler, who recently retired from the Navy. He actually led the United States' premier hypersonic program, Conventional Prompt Strike, as a Navy captain. He was also captain of USS Norfolk, which is a nuclear-powered submarine. He unfortunately was not able to be with us tonight. He's actually speaking at a national hypersonic conference, but brings huge experience and expertise in this arena. We also have with us tonight Alex Raisler, who's come over from Sandia, where he was also an expert on hypersonics. And then if we're talking about the advisors in the bottom left, they're not full-time employees with Castellian, but they have been close advisors to us since the early days, and we work very closely with them. That's Dr. Lisa Porter and Dr. Mike Griffin. Mike Griffin is critical leader in the hypersonics community. He's a former NASA administrator. He actually led NASA after the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster in 2003. He led that investigation and shuttle return to flight, and he was also Undersecretary of Defense for RDT&E. I say all of this because, once again, we are a young company, but we bring really deep expertise and deep experience across aerospace, across the defense sector, and in hypersonics especially. Just to give kind of a quick overview of our facilities, we're headquartered in Torrance, California, in the Los Angeles area. We have operations in West Texas and in Allen, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, team in DC. And of course, we're talking today about what we internally call Prop Site 2, which is Project Ranger, the scale production site. Just a couple points on this slide talking a little bit about our government contract work. So you'll see on there, if you sum those numbers up, it's a little bit over $30 million shown. That right box is a recent set of awards. These are integration contracts with the U.S. Army and with the U.S. Navy. So this is taking our first product, which is called Blackbeard, and integrating it onto existing U.S. Army and Navy programs, conducting test launches, and preparing for scale production. I cannot disclose the dollars on that contract today, but I can tell you that it is a multiple of the sum of all the other contracts on the page. Also noting, we've just closed our Series B. That's a $350 million financing round that was led by, our financings have been led by firms called Andreessen Horowitz, Lightspeed, Altimeter Capital, and General Catalyst. I bring those names up because within the world of venture capital and growth equity, those are considered some of the sort of blue chip of the blue chip names. The takeaway that I want you to have from this is, from the customer side, from the Department of War, from the armed services, there is very high conviction in what we are doing, and there is, I would say, a very intense demand for us to be able to deliver these capabilities to U.S. forces as soon as possible. This is seen as a strategically critical need. The department is putting their money where their mouth is. Across the bottom, I only bring this up because these are investors that have helped build very successful companies across different sectors in the past. They're coming in a very big way from an investment standpoint, and we are very well capitalized today to make all the investments that we are talking about here in Rio Rancho, and to close out development of what we call Blackbeard, our first hypersonic system, and bring it into production. Getting down to some sort of brass tacks on the site and the operations. Just starting out with sort of, look, we said we're manufacturing solid rocket motors. What is a solid rocket motor? That's a diagram from an old textbook on the left there. But what it is it is a, I'll talk about the production process in a moment, but it is a solid mass of rocket propellant, which, when ignited, produces thrust through the nozzle, as you can see in the image there. Solid rocket motors are the standard rocket motor that is used in almost all U.S. missile systems. And they're commonly used in U.S. and allied missile systems for a number of reasons. One, they're storable. They have very long shelf lives. They're affordable. They're very efficient to make. And three, they're insensitive to outside environments. So that both means that hot or cold, humid or dry, you can cycle them through. They'll survive that, and they'll still work very reliably. But it also means that you can drop them, you can bang them up, you can be pretty rough with them, as the armed forces tend to be, and you can count on them to be stable, and you can count on them to be safe. We'll talk a little bit more about that later with a program called insensitive munitions. It's a really important point of this, but I want to really hit the point that these are very stable energetics, as compared to, if you look at liquid rocket motors, those are powered by kerosene and liquid oxygen. Those are very volatile. Those have short shelf lives. Those are the kinds of propellants that power, the Falcon 9 rocket that SpaceX uses, or there were a couple of launches today from Blue Origin. Those sorts of orbital launch space rockets tend to be liquid. We're making solids here. In terms of what the process of making solid rocket motors looks like, this always sounds a little bit silly, but it is actually a lot like baking. You have three sort of main groups of ingredients. You have inert propellant materials. So those are chiefly rubber material called IPDI, which is actually used in cosmetics, a number of other inert chemicals, mostly liquids. You got your liquid ingredients. And then there's two main, I'll call them dry ingredients. The first is ammonium perchlorate. We'll talk more about that later. But that's your oxidizer in the rocket propellant, and that's a powder, comes sealed in containers. And then you have powdered aluminum, and everyone knows what aluminum is, but this is a finely ground powder version of aluminum. These are mixed in, and honestly, it kind of looks like a large bread mixer. I know it's more sophisticated than that. There's a lot of federal standards about sort of process safety and all the standards that we have to meet in order to produce for the DoD, but fundamentally, the intuition is it has big mixer blades, and you are adding your ingredients in the right order and in the right ratios, and you are mixing them together into a slurry. Once you have that slurry, you cast that slurry into the rocket motor cases. These are long metal tubes that have been machined. You move those long metal tubes into a cure oven, basically just a large room that's held at relatively low temperature, actually. I won't get into it, but and then those cure over the course of a number of days. So you mix your slurry, cast it in the tube sits at temperature, and then by the end of that process, it's solidified and you have a solid rocket motor. At that point, you take it over, and all the other electronics I was talking about, the control actuation system, which moves the fins, the flight computer, so forth and so on, all of those are integrated into an all-up round. Those are placed in a special DOD and DOT-approved container and can be shipped off to Uncle Sam to be deployed. Why Rio Rancho? So we did a, I guess not quite national, but a pretty broad targeted search for what the best location in the country would be to go construct Project Ranger, Prop Site 2. We knew we needed three things. The first is an excellent and patriotic talent base. I say both of those words advisedly. This is a technically challenging process. It's part of the reason the jobs that we'll be creating, we'll get into this, are high-paying sort of full career jobs. You need people that are skilled, trained, good attention to detail, and I say patriotic advisedly too, because this is a critical national security mission, and we want people that care about the national security mission. Well, we looked in quite a few different places. For Rio Rancho, your proximity to Sandia and Los Alamos National Labs, as well as Kirtland Air Force Base, large veteran population, sort of a long history since the state's, I shouldn't say the state's inception, but certainly since 1940s in aerospace and defense. That heritage, those skills, that will to work on these sorts of programs are here. Not everyone has that. Rio Rancho has it in spades. Second, I mentioned speed. The government is very, very focused on bringing this capability up quickly because our adversaries are moving fast. So we want rapid access to electric and internet utilities. We have excellent paths forward on both, and I might add that we are doing both fully at Castellion's expense. Last, we need a large contiguous land area, and Section 36 is ideal for that. Now, one of the things that we do not need is large amounts of processed water. The main use for water on site is potable water for our employees. So it's bathrooms, kitchens, so forth and so on. We do not use water as an input in our processes, which means that sort of the one thing that the region does not have in abundance, which is water, we don't really need, and it ends up being a really good fit. In terms of our investment, so we are planning in excess of $100 million of investment in year one. We want to be committing hundreds of millions in the years that follow. This will be one of the premier and nationally important sites for missile production in the United States, and we want to be able to build a lot of capability here that will enable all the strategic goals that I was talking about earlier. That means that we are committed by the end of year 5 of this project in creating at least 300 jobs, and these are high-quality aerospace jobs. Just to talk a little bit about sort of what we typically offer, we offer full benefits to all of our employees. All of our employees have ownership stakes in the company. Everybody gets stock. Everybody gets skin in the game, and as we perform and as we grow, everyone gets to share in the upside. We're really proud of that. We think it's a really critical part of, one, building the company culture that we want to build, but two, also sharing the company's success and sharing growth and wealth with our employees. About half of these roles would be engineering roles, about half would be touch labor or technician roles. And as EDD was alluding to earlier, the mean compensation across those roles will be approximately $100,000 per year. In addition, we are committed to investing in partnering with local schools, trade unions, and universities. Part of the talent point that I forgot to mention earlier is we were very impressed with the local school and university system. New Mexico Tech in particular stands out, but really many schools in the university system here, as well as the community college system, are outputting some really high talent folks that we are excited to work with, and we want to make investments in those. We want to work with them on STEM education. We were at the R4 opening yesterday, and we're excited to work with them. We think there's a lot of opportunity here that's mutually beneficial, and we hope we'll have big spillover effects, positive effects for the community. We also got a number of questions about, well, where is this site positioned? If you head out there, we were out there earlier today. It does feel quite remote when you're out there, to be honest. There's rolling terrain around you. You really don't have direct line of sight to any of the community. You're a little less than 3 miles away from Northern Meadows. You're a little over 2 miles from Camino Crossing, and you're about 2.5 miles from the Rio Puerco switching station, the substation out there. Those are substantial distances. You definitely feel isolated while you're out there. But the question, and I think it's a very fair question, is how does that compare to other operations around the country? So we did a little bit of digging here. This is just sort of a summary. But what we found is that relative to some of the other major production sites around the country, Project Ranger is located further away from I'll say sort of major community areas. We have a few images here. You can see this is a site in West Virginia that also produces rocket motors and all-up rounds. It's just over a mile to some fairly substantial community areas. And if you look up in the northern edge, it's only about 900 feet across a river to a home from a process building. Similarly, at this Arkansas facility, it's about half a mile from a process building to a local church. In Camden, Arkansas, there's a number of similar examples, but there's, I would say, large energetics and munition storage buildings that are located about a mile away from a large community. Actually, there's a university there with university housing. And then at the Promontory, Utah facility, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, it's about a mile from some process buildings to a community just north of the Northrop site. So just to contextualize a little bit, what's normal? What do you see elsewhere around the country? Getting into site safety and site regulation. So this is a table showing all the various codes and requirements that we will be regulated by. So you'll see quite a few there, which are governed by the Construction Industries Division, which is, of course, a New Mexico state body. You see DOD Manual 4145. We will talk at length about that in a moment. That is a critical document that will govern our operations. And then, of course, you'll see a number of other New Mexico state agencies that will govern us, including the Environment Department and Department of Transportation. In addition, although they're not technically a regulator, under the terms of our lease with the State Land Office, we also have a number of, above and beyond those regulations we were talking about, a number of other steps that we are required to undertake and which we are undertaking in order to ensure the community is safe and in order to ensure that the site operates safely. So first, as Chief Wenzel alluded to, is a plume study. We are already conducting that study right now in conjunction with Sandia National Labs. And I might also add a number of these recommendations. So these are safety and environmental security related recommendations. A number of these recommendations came out of a safety study that was conducted by Sandia and peer-reviewed by Los Alamos, assessing potential impact of Project Ranger and safety of Project Ranger. So their overall assessment was effectively that this is well within the bounds of what's normal and this can be done safely. But here's some incremental recommendations that we have as a national lab that you can do this even more safely and burn down risk. State Land Office has incorporated all of those requirements into our lease. So that's the plume study. Transportation study is already complete to assess route safety in and out, and we'll talk more about transportation safety later. Includes implementation of electrostatic discharge and lightning protection. So, of course, you don't want lightning to strike one of your energetics buildings, but given the climate we're in, you're also worried about electrostatic discharge. So we have monitoring and procedures in place to prevent accidents of that nature. I don't have to go through every single one, but I'm happy to answer questions on them later. That does also include protection against runoff, mitigations against noise from static fires, spill containment measures, as well as robust site security and coordination and emergency response plans. Zooming in a little bit on NMED, we have been in close contact with them. We've already done a number of reviews on air quality. So as I mentioned earlier, we will be doing static fires on the site. So that means that we'll be igniting rocket motors. We have been working with NMED, on the composition of the plume from those rocket motors, any potential pollution effect or any effect on the community, and NMED has reviewed that work. We're also working with our Water Quality Management Bureau. We don't expect to have close involvement there just because we don't have water on site. but we're also partnering with them on hazardous and solid waste management. The current plan is that any waste from the site will be picked up, removed, and properly disposed of by a licensed and approved contractor. We will not be doing that ourselves. We will not be incinerating on site, but we're partnering with NMED to ensure that all that is done above board, according to reg, correctly, safely, and environmentally safely. I mentioned DOD 4145 earlier. This is a really critical set of rules, and this is just a little bit of an overview. Basically, the Department of Defense has a set of rules contained inside of 4145 that govern production of energetic materials, which means all-up rounds, which means solid rocket motors, and sets a large number of requirements on how this can be done safely and how this can be certified. It has to be proactively certified by the Department of Defense to ensure the contractors are manufacturing in a safe way and they're not jeopardizing their employees or the neighboring community. This goes back, the department's been involved in this back since, as you can see there, 1928, but a lot of the learnings come out of the Second World War and the early and mid-Cold War. So the document we're talking about today, 4145, was released in 1986, and it undergoes constant revision, constant updating. They're incorporating best practices, lessons learned from around the country. This is really critical because if we want to be able to run our business, we have to be compliant with this. We have to be certified by an organization called DCMA, which is a federal entity, to ensure we're compliant with it. Getting into the details of what it actually says, you'll see the site plan in a minute. I'll say sort of layers of protection or belt and suspenders a lot throughout this evening. With 4145, there's multiple layers to protection here. So when we see the site plan, one of the most obvious, most important ones is you want to separate different processes, and you want to have spacing, substantial spacing, between the individual process buildings and the facility perimeter. Basically what this means is you're not putting things together that could mutually cause an accident or cause an ignition event. You're implementing, as I'll talk more about in a moment, hazard analyses, trainings, procedures. There's a whole bevy of rules that govern, I mentioned the mixers earlier, that govern both safe operation of the mixers, but also specifications for how they can be built, how they can be operated, safety codes for how they separate to prevent an explosion. So you have to comply with all of these things. You have to implement procedures, implement training. You have to undergo constant improvement, constant review in order to prevent an accident. And then you also have the separation of buildings, fire breaks, so forth and so on, so that if the worst happens, this is the belt and suspenders, that accident is contained to the area of a single building. It doesn't propagate throughout the site. It doesn't cause a larger fire. It doesn't jeopardize the neighboring community. 4145 also governs, and I think we talked about it a little bit more on the next slide, there's also a number of other requirements there for on-site safety. So a number of hazardous operations have to be run remotely per 4145. I was talking about mixer operations. If you're running the mixer, there isn't some person standing there holding the button down, operating the mixer. All that is done in a separate secure area so that those operations are done remotely and there's no safety risk to the employees involved. Other than that, we've actually been intentionally conservative on our assumptions around setback distances. We'll have a full perimeter fence, both to protect the facility and to keep the public safe around the entire facility. We'll have 24/7 security, and our requirement is going to be that that 24/7 security force has first aid and in many cases EMT training, as well as full, I would say, partnering with first responders and full understanding in how to implement the emergency response plan, how to respond to emergencies. We will also have, not as robust as the city, of course, but frontline fire suppression capabilities on site. So this is the overall site layout, just to provide a little bit of orientation on how large this is. It's about 2 miles from east to west, about 1 mile north to south. On the monitor, the captioning is covering it, but if you look at your hard copies, the building, I believe it's Building Z, on the southern end of the site is a 200,000 square foot building. So this is a sizable area, and those are very sizable separation distances between each of the individual buildings on site. I'll actually go to the next slide here and show you the hazard arcs. So these are called the inhabited building distance arcs. These are some of the separation distances between operations on site, and these are also the separation distances between any hazardous operation, any energetic material, and members of the public. You'll see none of those circles cross the red dotted line, which is the outer perimeter fence. This is just sort of an overview of the site without the fence to give you a sense of what it would look like. Static fire testing, we've had a number of questions on. The main things I want to emphasize here are what I mentioned earlier. We're working with the New Mexico Environment Department on plume and environmental effects to make sure that there is no long-lived effect from the static fire testing and no jeopardy to the environment. And then, of course, the other very understandable question is noise. The noise in Northern Meadows will be equivalent roughly, this is if you're standing outside, by the way, not if you're inside your house. It will be roughly equivalent to the sound of a vacuum cleaner. It will be on the order of 80 decibels. Those tests will only be conducted during business, sort of daylight operating hours or normal operating hours, and we are required by the lease to comply with local noise ordinances with our static fire testing. In terms of frequency, the number of tests per week will vary, but we're talking about a normal frequency on the order of several times per week, not many times per day or every hour or anything like that under normal operations. Waste management and spill prevention. This is a critical part of both our facility design and our training and procedures. So this is, once again, belt and suspenders, right? We want to be training, we have to be training actually, per the regulations and per 4145. We have to be training all of our employees in how to move materials safely. We have to be training them in how to respond to a spill, and we have to have procedures in place so the materials are only being moved in an area where you're not accidentally going to spill ammonium perchlorate, on open soil, anything like that. So procedures, policies, training, critical. But then the second layer of defense here is spill management plans and also designing the facility to be as inherently resistant to spills as possible. So that means having specific rooms inside of specific buildings where any chemical transfers are taking place and ensuring that those buildings have specifically rated dust collection systems to make sure you don't have escapes or buildup of dust that could either cause a physical hazard, an ignition risk, or build up over time and create an environmental risk. I will say very directly, ammonium perchlorate, which is the oxidizer I mentioned earlier, it's a powder. One of the major concerns for that folks in the community have, absolutely that we have, is you do not want that going into the ground. You don't want that getting into groundwater. If you look, there are horror stories from the early Cold War, from 1950s, 60s into the early 70s, where missile production plants did have exposure or spill events with ammonium perchlorate. Well, that is precisely why these regulations we were talking about earlier are under constant review. It's precisely why those regs are updated, and those sorts of events have been factored into the regulations and requirements today. They've been factored into our policies, procedures, and into our building design specifically to ensure that those sorts of things do not happen again. That track record has drastically improved over time. It's obviously really unfortunate that any communities were affected by it, but the good news from that, and I think this is the story of a lot of environmental policy in the United States, is that those really unfortunate incidents have fed into new best practices, new procedures, new technologies, and new requirements to prevent them from happening in the future. And as a new facility, we have the benefit of taking all of those lessons learned into account and being required to comply with them. In terms of the code variants, Rio Rancho Fire and Rescue, of course, has covered this a bit, so I won't belabor this point. But we've already discussed use of fire sprinklers. The only thing I want to add on the pollution point is the three critical things with sort of placement of water and fire suppression are you want to protect the first responders, you want to protect the community, and of course you want to protect the environment. That means that the guidance here is If it's an energetics building and there's no human life at risk, you let the building burn. You contain it, of course. You don't, the firefighters are there, and this is part of the emergency response plan, and we're working with them very closely to make sure that that fire doesn't spread or cause harm to the community or to the rest of the site. But the priority is making sure that the first responders are safe and making sure that in the course of suppressing the fire, you don't create a situation where you're spreading chemicals on the ground. And that's sort of well understood, and that's factored into the guidance and into the regs. So again, that's sort of been covered by Chief Wenzel, but just to make mention of it. We did have some questions from the community on an incident that took place in April 2025 at the Promontory facility. This is a Northrop facility in Utah. So this was a facility that was making sodium perchlorate. I mentioned ammonium perchlorate, that's one of the key ingredients in the rocket propellant, right? So they were actually making the ammonium perchlorate. This is like a precursor to it in a synthesis process. This is not something that we will be doing as part of Project Ranger, but we can still use it as a case study. So in this case, policies, procedures were not correctly followed. There was a spill of some material that should have been cleaned up, and there was an accident with a forklift striking some of that material and igniting it. Bad situation. But once again, we talk about sort of the belt and suspenders here. This was a failure of the belt, so to speak. There's a failure of procedures and of training. However, the other safety measures that are in place did their job. All the employees made it out of the building. There were no injuries. And if you look a little bit at the setback distances, you can see that building suffered severe damage. But if you look at some of the other buildings nearby, there's a building about 350 feet away, which is entirely undamaged. And the bottom right, there's actually a building 120 feet away, which also has storage in its yard area, which is also undamaged. And there were no injuries, no harm to any folks in that building. We included this slide just to contextualize. If you drew a 120-foot boundary around the entire site, and some of those buildings are not process buildings, you'll see that there's a substantial amount of margin between that and the perimeter fence. Lastly, transportation safety. So we've been talking a little bit about the facility itself, how we keep the operation safe, how we keep the community safe. The other key point is there will be trucks entering and exiting the facility with ammonium perchlorate, and they'll be exiting the facility with the finished all-up rounds. So how do we ensure that folks are safe during transportation? And for that, we want to start with an incident from 1967. This is during the Vietnam War, which is the USS Forrestal incident. This is an infamous incident in Navy history. It was a terrible incident. 134 sailors died, hundreds more were seriously injured, and it came about because of a munitions accident. A rocket was accidentally fired. It was sort of a freak accident. But then there were a number of bombs, which had not undergone any sorts of intensive munition testing that dated the Korean War. They were immersed in jet fuel. The jet fuel cooked the bombs off. The bombs detonated. As I was saying earlier, many sailors were killed. The Forrestal, which is a U.S. aircraft carrier, nearly sunk as a result of this incident. And the reason this incident is so important is the Navy basically looked at this in 1967 and said, never again can this ever be allowed to happen. We cannot have a situation where we're at risk of losing a ship and losing this many lives because of a munitions accident. And this, it's been updated, revised, improved many times, but this is sort of the genesis of what's called the insensitive munitions program. The all-up rounds, so the finished missiles in their cases that we will be manufacturing, have to pass these standards and this battery of tests to show that they will not basically go off and present a danger to folks around them. And this is a pretty exhaustive battery of tests. So this includes being fast heating, basically immersed in jet fuel fire, slow heating, which mimics a fire inside of a truck, bullet impact, which is being shot with 50 caliber rounds, being hit by fragmentation, sympathetic reaction, so other rounds going off nearby can't set them off. This is all the way up to a shaped charge jet, so hitting it with a rocket launcher or an anti-tank weapon, and a drop test. So we have to prove to the Navy that we can meet these standards, and these standards will apply to all of the packaged all-up rounds that we will be manufacturing and shipping out of this site. So from a transportation safety perspective, what if there's a truck fire? What if a truck overturns? Completely fair questions, completely reasonable. Like, I would be worried about these as well. And the answer is the Navy is also extremely worried about that. They have the history of this, of the Forrestal and other accidents, and they've implemented these steps to make sure that nothing like that repeats itself. So this is a huge, huge mitigant from a safety perspective for those shipments leaving the factory. For shipments entering the factory, sort of the main energetic material that will be coming in is ammonium perchlorate. That's the oxidizer that keeps coming up. So we buy those directly from the manufacturer. They're packed in steel drums, and inside of those drums, they're double packed inside of plastic bags. They have to go through that battery of tests that's listed there in order to prove to the Department of Transportation that packaging is safe. So that's dropping, pressurizing, so forth and so on. I will say that we did some research on this. We worked with some consultants who are experts on energetic safety. We can't find an instance of an ammonium perchlorate shipment catching fire in the United States. So these are the standards, but in terms of sort of case studies, we were not able to locate any in transit. I will also say, and this comes back to sort of what I opened with, which is we are very empathetic to the fact that this sounds scary because it's exotic. It's not something that folks encounter very often, or at least it's not something people think about. But I think what's really helpful is to sort of contextualize it. So a truck full of missiles sounds very scary, to be honest. But if you actually compare it to the amount of energy in, say, a gasoline tanker, you'll find that for both the all-up rounds and for ammonium perchlorate, you're talking about an energy in the gasoline tanker that is tens of times higher than what's being transported into the facility. That might seem counterintuitive, but this is just sort of, you know, it's exposure therapy. You're used to seeing gasoline tankers, you're used to seeing propane trucks. They're in a lot of ways actually a lot scarier, but you see them every day, so you don't think twice about it. This is sort of the obverse of that, where you don't see it every day, you think a lot about it, very understandably, but there are a ton of safety measures that we've been talking about today, a ton of testing, and then sort of the inherent level of energy inside of that truck is actually lower. This is the shipment route in and out of Project Ranger. So the city manager was speaking a bit about this. This reflects the path along Paseo de Volcan. And then just to contextualize, if we're talking about hazardous material transport in and out, under normal operations, our expectation is you're talking typically 1 or 2 AP deliveries per week, 1 or 2 payload deliveries per week, and 3 or 4 all-up round shipments leaving the facility. These are not hard numbers, they're not caps. We can picture exigent circumstances, God forbid, where these numbers increase because of national emergency, but under normal operations, I want folks to understand that the hazardous material transport, we're talking about, you know, high single digit, maybe on the very, very high end, very low double digit numbers of shipments per week. It's not like it's not a distribution center where you just have a continuous stream of chemicals going by. I hope that has been helpful. Emphasize again that we really sincerely want to answer people's questions. We want to get people comfortable. We want to be as direct as we can be, and happy to defer to some of my colleagues if you folks have technical questions in a moment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Coming back to you, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the governing body, my suggestion would be at this point, Mr. Mayor, that you proceed to public comment.
Okay. We will do that. Okay. We're going to go ahead and do public comment in front of a motion tonight because there's going to be a lot of discussion back and forth. So we'll get the public comment and input before the motion. So we'll start off with Mr. Van Horn.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, I signed up to speak on R-135, resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and enter into an agreement for water and potentially wastewater services. So what this resolution does, it says there's going to be an exception to a longstanding policy that Rio Rancho does not provide outside its city limits water or wastewater. And there's a big, very important reason for this. I heard tonight that from economic development that $650 million is what's projected as a benefit. So it seems to me that that's the price tag it takes to get an exception to a longstanding policy. That will enable the next comer who offers $652 million to get an exception, because all it takes for an exception is to write a resolution that says this is a one-off. I want to tell you that today KRQE announced that there was a toxic chromium plume from Los Alamos National Laboratory that spread to Pueblo de San Ildefonso land with contamination levels exceeding state groundwater standards. The New Mexico Environmental Department says there's no imminent threat to drinking water on Pueblo land or Los Alamos County because the plume is not near any known drinking well yet. New Mexico NMED says the U.S. Department of Energy's chromium mitigation efforts failed. And because of that, they are planning to file a lawsuit. We heard tonight many risks. This plant is going to be near 3 of our wells. They're transporting stuff that has no limitation on transport. They can take it across the bridges, crossing the Rio Grande. We know what happens here when we get a 100-year flood in our arroyos. And this stuff doesn't like water. So I think you've heard many risks tonight. And I hope that you don't end up making a decision that comes down to what it usually comes down to. It's all about the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Farrell. Good evening.
Mayor, council, staff, public. Yeah, that was some pretty heavy stuff he just laid on you. And that's true, that just came out about 3 hours ago. And it's not a coincidence. Somebody's telling you, and you guys have a hard decision to make tonight. Really hard one. You've had all this money, these econ guy, man. I want a job. He made it sound great. Does he live in Rio Rancho? No, I do. All these people here do. You guys do. This project didn't come from you, and we know that, guys. It came from the county, from the state, from people who will never have to answer for long-term consequences the way you, I, all of us will. We live here. And I don't believe for a second that any one of you guys up there want to put Rio Rancho at risk. Please look at all the information. There's so much more that's needed. We're not saying no, we hate economic growth. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. It's awesome to see that Chief Wenzel went over and had more questions. I love that. I love some of the questions that are coming up here. We've kind of lived through this pattern before, guys, with the county and how they pass things, and then we got to try to cover it. The low-income apartments by Home Depot, the new ones going across from the courthouse, the tag solar, the battery storage, the little fence around it, all decided by Sandoval County. And every time, Rio Rancho and our residents are left holding the outcome. Now, Project Ranger, another approved county thing here, they want the Rio Rancho taxpayers. They're asking us to build a road, extend the water, and shoulder the long-term risks to our aquifer, our safety, our health, and possibly declining home values near Project Ranger. This is exactly why Rio Rancho fought for home rule status, so that outside governments, outside entities, cannot use our city as a backstop for their decisions. If this facility is such a regional benefit like the everybody's saying this economic guy, did we try to annex the land? Would the county let us? Why are we being asked to break that long-standing rule that Steve Van Horn just brought up? Is it money? I know you guys aren't like that. I know that you guys will care about the people. You've been elected by these people. Now we've learned, something we learned about the reports is that we know that Sandia's safety report isn't even an approved safety review. Sandia literally states that, and they admit they have research partnership with Castilian. So this wasn't an independent assessment. The report also warns of toxic byproducts from those static fires. You saw the picture. Where's that flame going? Look at where's it going, guys? We're right near Arroyo. SCAP is going to have to look at this. Thank you for the time. I had a lot more. Got to go enjoy my wife. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Zachary Darden.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. So I actually am an employee for Bernalillo County, but I'm a resident here of Rio Rancho. My family moved here the first time in 2009, and we fell in love with it. Like, I really appreciate the land. So I just would kind of like to try to encourage you guys to just have more of a second thought, more pending thought with the impact that this is going to do to our environment. I really do worry about like the water usage and the strain on our already strained aquifers that we have here in Rio Rancho, since we have no existing surface water. A slide that I was actually present at the October 21st public meeting, and there was a piece that was actually mentioned and the slide before about the water usage, saying that it's going to use approximately 50 households worth of water. I did notice that that actually was not included in this slide in this previous presentation. Now, 50 households of water doesn't seem like a ton, but the average American household right now is using about 400 gallons of water. So you put that in perspective of 365 days a year, that's almost 8 million gallons of water a year. And I was actually a little bit off last time, but 8 million gallons of water is quite a bit on a very arid area that we live here in Rio Rancho. I do also worry about the residents and the property owners in that area. I'm actually a property owner myself. That's something I take great pride in, and I take great pride in this land, and that's part of the reason I got into the environmental field, is to give back to the land. And I know there was something that was mentioned earlier about the area being very kind of remote, a little bit desolate. There are people that still live out there, Mayor Gregg. They might not seem like people that you probably invite to your dinner table. They're probably not people that you would particularly see in like a Northern Meadows neighborhood, but they're people. And I'm very concerned with what's going to happen to those. I've became very close to some of those people out there, and I worry about that. Like, there's not been any mention of what will happen to those property owners, what will happen to people who want to give back to that area. I do also worry about our national security with the labs, with the Kirkland Air Force Base. Do we really want to put national security a threat on top of it? I know that was mentioned at the public meeting on October 21st by another concerned individual, and I still, in the presentation, did not see much about addressing that concern. I am in support of economic growth for Rio Rancho. I think we need it. I mean, I also don't enjoy driving across the river every single morning and dealing with I-25 and all that chaos. But is it really at the expense of the health of our citizens and our land? That's something that I know, like was mentioned before, you guys have a hard decision to make tonight. And I do appreciate you guys and your team for doing a lot of your research and like giving back to like the community. That's beautiful. I love that. But I just really think that, is it at the expense of our land and our people right now? So thank you.
Thank you. See, Jay Block, Senator. Welcome, Mr. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and city councilors. You know, when I'm listening to Mr. Kreitz's presentation, I kind of went back to a time in our history, which was very dangerous. I was reminded of our Sputnik moment in October of 1957, when our country was falling behind the Russians in the space race and in the missile race. Today, our country is severely, significantly falling behind the Chinese and the Russians in the hypersonic race. As a former retired Air Force officer who has been around this business in missile operations, in spacelift operations, and been in industry as well for about 10 years doing this and seeing the information that Andrew was touching on, this is the type of stuff that keeps me up at night. Tonight, you, as councilors and leaders of our great city, the best place to live in New Mexico too, by the way, Mr. Mayor, so thank you all for your leadership. You have an opportunity to make sure that Rio Rancho plays a critical and crucial role in our national security. The country is counting on you tonight. This is our chance. Tonight is our chance to take that step to close the gap with our competitors in our global competition. Why do I care so much about this? Well, I care because it's my background. I know Councilor Tyler is a veteran in the United States Navy. I know Mr. Van Horn is a veteran in the United States Navy. I'm a veteran as well and a combat veteran. And my background is, I believe, gives me some credibility when it comes to Castilian and operations like this that will benefit our community and our country. The governor, I've talked to the governor many times on this. She supports this. I've talked to the lieutenant governor. Worked with Rob Black. I've worked with the county, the state land office. This has been an incredible bipartisan effort between Republicans and Democrats to bring this great company here to Rio Rancho. And I will tell you, Mr. Mayor and fellow councilors, this is the finest aerospace team I have seen in my 30 years in the military and in aerospace. You won't find a better team than what Castilian put up there on the screen. No one compares to that. It's incredible. And I understand the safety issue. I live here with my family. I've been around this business with my family for over 2 decades. This company has a robust risk management framework to make sure that they are protecting people in Rio Rancho. And I just lastly would like to thank them for making an incredible contribution already in our community at the R4 Creations yesterday, where you and I were at, Mr. Mayor. They donated a nice check to that company because they believe in this community, they believe in Rio Rancho. And I ask you to support this company and to help our national defense in our moment of crisis in this country that we're facing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wayne Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I'll be brief. I just want to let you know that myself and the county team from Sandoval County, our DCM, Mr. Masterson, our fire chief, Mr. Bagley, and our public works director are here. If you have questions about safety or about roads that we can answer, we'd be happy to do so during your deliberation or your discussion. Obviously, we're here in support of this project, and thank you for your consideration.
Ronald Bohannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Ron Bohannon. I'm a Metro resident. I'm not a resident of Rio Rancho. My family's only been here for 65 years. I'm the second generation registered professional engineer, raising third generation registered professional engineers. A little bit about my background. I spent 10 years on the Professional Engineer, Professional Surveying Licensing Board, both appointed by Susana Martinez and then reappointed by our current governor. This project is pivotal. This is a great project for the metro area and specifically for the city of Rio Rancho. This project sits 1,000 feet above the groundwater. So the limitations or the potential of contaminations are very minor. It's a perfect fit for the southwestern environment. Contrary to popular belief, we do have a lot of water, but this industry uses very little water. In my 40 years as a professional engineer, doing land development and civil engineering, we've had our fair share of contracts at both Los Alamos and Sandia Labs. This is the first time that we're seeing the fruits of a labor of a lot of these elements that have come out of both labs can come to a manufacturing plant that the state of New Mexico and specifically Rio Rancho can benefit from. What this means is you now have a state-of-the-art technology manufacturing plant that will be able to breed off of both Los Alamos and Sandia to make those next generations, because this is the very first generation. You've got to look at this as saying this is just the very beginning step. This is a fantastic opportunity for the city of Rio Rancho. I'd like to close in support saying this is equivalent to an individual that started in Albuquerque in the early 70s. His name was Bill Gates. And we would really like to see this technology take off in New Mexico. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jerry Shallow.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, this project is great for Rio Rancho. Yes, it is in Sandoval County, but it is great for Rio Rancho. $650 million economic impact. That's not going to be economic impact in Sandoval County. That's going to be economic impact in Rio Rancho. That is from jobs created where people are going to live. I hear all the time from folks that live on the west part of the city. They want grocery stores, they want retail operations, they want businesses out there. Yes, this project is 3 miles away, but these folks are going to be living in Rio Rancho. And that's going to create opportunity for expansion for retail. It's going to create the opportunity for Paseo de Volcan to finally expand to Rainbow. That's what needs to happen out of this project is Paseo de Volcan needs to go to Rainbow so that Rainbow will connect to Southern and we have a back loop around the city. It's a great opportunity. We have talked about Paseo de Volcan for, gosh, Mayor, I don't know how long. It's been forever. But what was always the purpose of Paseo de Volcan? It was industrial jobs all the way to I-40, creating that loop. This piece right here that they're discussing creates that first opportunity for industrial jobs west of the city along Paseo de Volcan. Just to give you an idea, here in Rio Rancho, our median income has gone up from $54,000 to $85,000 since the census till now. And I will tell you the reason why is folks are living in Rio Rancho that work at Sandia National Labs, work at Los Alamos National Labs, and work in Santa Fe. The reason they're living here, we have a great place to live here. Rio Rancho is the best place in the state to live in and definitely top 10 in the Southwest. But here's the bottom line, is we have all the talent right here in our backyard and we lose revenue, GRT dollars, tax dollars every day because we send it to Santa Fe, Los Alamos, and Albuquerque. This creates the opportunity to bring that right here. So with that, I urge you to think about our future, our schools, our potential. Matter of fact, one other thing I want to bring up is our population count, age 19 to 34. If you take a look at our population, it's the lowest of any population source in Rio Rancho. They leave school in high school and they don't come back until age 35. Take a look at it, it's public record. This is a company, brings the potential that these jobs are going to bring people here and keep them here. Thank you. I urge you to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all we had signed up to speak on public comment. So before we start hearing from the council and before we start taking motions, I'm going to go ahead and take let's take a 15-minute recess. So we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock.
You